Thank you for joining me here at McBride and District Public Library. I want to talk to you today about Black History Month, and I'm going to be doing a short book review each week of some of the amazing titles that we've got in our collection that I think you might enjoy. So Black History Month runs throughout the whole of February. The image I've used for the posters this year is the Sankofa bird. I just wanted to explain this to begin with in case any of you are unfamiliar with this image. It's a traditional African image, the Sankofa, and the idea is that in order to move forward into the future, we have to understand and come to terms with the past. So the bird here is either represented as carrying an egg in its mouth or a seed, but it's looking backwards. So it's about the future, but looking backwards. And this is often used as an appropriate image when thinking about the importance of understanding the history. So in the context of Black History Month, we might think of that in terms of a way of understanding continued racial inequalities today, is to think about where they came from, where they originated. Now, the book I want to talk to you about today is a book about slavery. It's written by Andrea Levy, and it's called The Long Song. And all the books I want to talk to you about are books that we have here in the library that you can borrow. So Andrea Levy, if you're not familiar with her work, was a Jamaican British author. The Long Song was published in 2010, and it's what we tend to call a neo-slave narrative. So it's a contemporary book written recently, but it's in the style of an 18th century slave narrative. So it's mainly written in the first person, or sections are written in the first person. There's an attempt to capture the tone and the voice of slaves in it. And Andrea Levy has talked about her reason for wanting to write this book in an accompanying essay that was published in my copy of The Long Song. It's actually published in the back. And it was called The Writing of the Long Song. You can also access this online. She says in the essay, writing fiction is a way of putting back the voices that were left out. Not just the wails of anguish and victimhood that we are used to, although that is very much part of the story, but the chatter and clatter of people building their lives, families and communities, ducking, diving and conducting the businesses of life in appalling circumstances. Now there is a story. So I think we can see what she's getting at there, the inadequacy of received accounts of history, but also a kind of critique of the idea that slavery is just black victimhood. It's not just a song of pain. It's also about resistance. And this entire book is about resistance. When we think about slave resistance, we often think of grand gestures, burning down the plantation house. But what this book shows us is that little acts of subservience, little acts of resistance are important too. For example, there's a moment in this book where the slave puts bed linen on the fine dining table in order to horrify her owner. There's another moment where a dish of cockroaches is served up as a delicious feat. And it's told in a very amusing, irreverent tone. So it follows a story of Kitty and her life as a slave. We tend to think about slavery as being a somber, bleak topic. And of course, there's no getting away from that. But there's also a great deal of humour injected into this novel, which is partly to do with Andrea Levy's idea that, slavery is more than just victimhood. So So I just want to read you the first paragraph. It's also read aloud day on Wednesday, so it seems an appropriate moment for me to just read. The book you are now holding within your hand was born of a craving. My mama had a story that lay so fat within her breast that she felt impelled by some force which was mightier than her own will to relay this tale to me, her son. Her intention was that, once knowing the tale, I would then, at some other date, convey its narrative to my own daughters. And so it would go on. The fable would never be lost, and in its several recitals might gain a majesty to rival the legends told, whilst pointing at the portraits or busts in any fancy great house upon this island of Jamaica. It was a fine ambition from a noble old woman for whom many of her years were lived in harsh circumstance. This wish demanded respect. So as you can hear from that opening, it's the idea that I was told this story by someone who lived these experiences. And we often see that at the start of historical slave narratives, such as Equiano's story, Sancho's narrative. We have these little editors' comments that they are recounting the true story of someone, or they are publishing the true story of someone. It's a fast read. My copy has 312 pages in, but it's a fast read. It is a light-hearted read, but it's an important read. So this is my first book recommendation, The Long Song. I'll have another book for you next week. Thank you.